Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lockie, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at existing financial planning professionals as well as those looking to enter the financial planning profession. This particular series of podcasts is focusing on financial planning businesses. We share new ideas and challenge your thought processes to help you improve your service to your clients. We have some amazing guests lined up, helping you look at things very differently. I hope that you enjoy today's podcast episode. Continuing our series on looking at business aspects of a financial planning firm, I have a very special guest who's joined me today, and that is Andy Bounds. Hello, Andy.
Hi there, Jackie. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yes, very good, thank you.
Now, we have lots to talk about. For some of our listeners, won't have met you before, but some of them will at the CISI Financial Planning Conference, which we were just reminiscing, weren't we? It's probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, at Celtic Manor in Newport. So we are going to talk about communication, about websites, and about attracting clients and actually supporting your team around you along the way as well. So before we get into all of that, I want to ask you about how you got into sales and how that in turn helped you clarify your business approach that you have today and how you help others become more successful with sales.
Okay, so my mum is blind, which is a bit of a strange way to start a thing, but this is how I got into sales. So when I was a little child, the person who told me to speak can't see because she's blind. And so even at the earliest age, I was always thinking, what's the best way to describe this to make sure that my mum was like not losing out because she couldn't see. So I became passionately, almost geekily interested in communicating from someone else's point of view. And as I went through my life, I got more and more interested in that. And I found I was really interested when I was talking to my children, because I think a thing that some parents do is they think children are small adults. They're not, they're children. They're totally different things, and they see the world differently than we do. So I've always been really interested in this. And then I went to a presentation many, many years ago, which was a bit of a sales job by a bank. And, oh, Jackie, it was just rubbish. It was so boring. And I just thought, why have you've got a captive audience. Why have you been so boring about this? And then a couple of days later, I went to another presentation by another bank, and that was even worse. And it suddenly dawned on me, Jackie, most people don't know how to do this. It's not that I have normal knowledge and they're unusually bad. It was what they was doing I thought was fairly usual, and I knew things that they didn't because of my blind mum. So that's what started me on the world of thinking, Corey, imagine if just as I've learned these skills to apply it to mum, imagine if I could learn this and apply it to the sales world, how helpful it could be for me, but also for my clients. And that's where it started.
Wow. Yeah, that's a fantastic way to start and a great way to look at things very differently. Your ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, something that many people just find it so hard to do. And, in the financial services world, I think because of past mis-selling scandals that we've had, across the last 2 or 3 decades now, pensions mis-selling and mortgages and, all of that, those sorts of issues. Stuff, yes. Then sales, the word sales has kind of been a bit of a nasty word in the financial services world because people, attach that to these mis-selling scandals, I think. And so if you talk to many financial planners, they will say to you, I'm not a salesman. I believe that I can kind of lay out my row of deck chairs and my clients will come to me just by osmosis or something. And it's really interesting that actually what they are doing is selling themselves, selling their business proposition. So how do you think that financial planners with some of the stigma that's still attached after these issues that have gone on in the past, how can we get over not seeing ourselves as salesmen?
Well, it depends what you think a sale is. I mean, if people equate sales as that sleazy, horrible talking about stuff that people don't want, mis-selling, nasty bullying behavior almost, then I wouldn't want to do that either. But I don't see selling like that. I see selling as just one of the most beautiful things you can do if you do it properly. So the other day I had a problem with my iPhone, and I went into the Apple store, and then I came out having spent 40 odd pounds on a new battery, and I was absolutely delighted because my phone worked really well and it was cool. And I suddenly thought, well, selling was fine that day because I wanted it. And then we've recently had a new kitchen put in our house, and it's absolutely lovely. And it was extremely expensive and all these sort of things, but I'm really delighted by it, Jackie. So someone made a sale and I made a purchase and everything was good. And so selling is brilliant if the customer thinks it's brilliant, and it's dreadful if they don't. So the thing to remember with selling is, I mean, the word suggests selling, it suggests we're doing something to somebody. You know, we are selling to them. But the way I always suggest that people, whether financial planners or accountants or lawyers or literally anybody in the world ever, when you think of selling, think of the word afters. And what I mean by the word afters is, why are people better off after you? So let's say, if you want, that I am a lawyer and I am very uncomfortable about selling. And so therefore I don't tell you that after working with you, Jackie, I can help keep you out of jail because I'm really good at law. But I don't tell you that because I feel uncomfortable talking about selling. And then what happens is you end up in jail, and you go to jail for 10 years, and then you eventually come out of jail, and we're having a talk in a pub in 10 years' time. And I say to you, oh, I could have kept you out of jail. And you say, well, why didn't you tell me? I go, well, I feel uncomfortable selling. Because of course I feel uncomfortable banging on about how good I am at law. But if you say you're worried about going to jail and I say I could help you not go to jail, you'll say, brilliant, let's have a chat. And so the thing is, nobody wants a financial planner. So don't sell financial planning to me. But I'll tell you what I do want after you. I want to have more money in my pocket. I want to retire earlier. I want to feel that my children are being looked after. I'd love to buy a house for all of them. Child 2, as we call them, Jackie, we don't give our kids names anymore. Child 2's recently had a baby, so I'm a granddad now. So I want to make sure that beautiful grandchild 1 is okay. And so I don't want a financial planner. So anyone who rings up, tell me how good they are at financial planning, can get stuffed. But anyone who rings me up and says, oh, hey, you've got a new arrival, would you like to make sure that you're providing for them? I would snap their hands off, because I don't want the planning. I want why I'm better off after it. And if financial planners can remember that, it makes it a much more pleasant conversation for me to have, but also for them to have.
Yeah, yeah. And it's much less, kind of flog it and run, which is the kind of how the mis-selling scandal started in many cases. And that leads me nicely on. Congratulations, by the way, on grandchild arrival.
Yeah.
That leads me nicely on to talk to you about how there are so many good financial planners out there. And, I've been looking at their websites, a lot of them over the last couple of months, and I see the majority of them really, really similar. Yeah. And we always talk in the financial services world that if you want to differentiate yourself, if you want to stand out from the crowd, you've got to do something differently. You've got to, offer your services. And like you say, think about the afters. And all of the websites that I have looked at, I'm not sure that any of them, hand on heart, talked about afters. And so what can we do as financial planners to make our websites both more attractive to clients, but also to stand out from the crowd of now seemingly every man and his dog in the financial advice world is calling themselves a financial planner. Some are not, and some are. So how can we stand out from the crowd?
Okay, well, there's lots of ways to do it. I mean, you've answered your question there by one of them is talking about the afters, because nobody else does. So for example, I won some work recently with an organisation, and they basically agreed after about 15 minutes that they were going to do some work with me, Jackie. And it's quite a big piece of work. And I said to them, can I just check, are you sure about this? Because you've said yes very quickly to a very big sum. We've only been talking for 15 minutes. And they said, well, we've spoken to loads of people who do sales training and all that stuff, and we just think you're the right fit for us. And I said, again, you've got to, let me just ask you, why? Because I don't want you to wish you had not said yes so quickly. Let's just make sure you're happy with this. And they said, well, you're the only person who told us that you can help us sell more. I said, what? They said, every other sales training company we've spoken to tells us about their unique 7-step approach to this, or their 5-step approach to this, or their unique value add offering, or the fact that they've got 3 of these and 4 of those. And you just have gone straight in with the, using our words, Jackie, why they'll be better off after me. So, and this is sales trainers, so nobody talks about afters as much as they should. So one way to make yourself different is to talk about the afters. So if somebody says, what do you do? Don't say I'm a financial planner, because that's what everybody does. You say something like, I can help you retire earlier than you thought you could.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people go, how do you do that? And you go, well, it depends. There's one of two ways. Why don't you tell me a bit about your life, and I can give you some relevant examples. And people go, oh, that's cool. So if you think in terms of afters, I mean, when I look at differentiating about being different, I remember, the little ants, those little insects, ANTS. There are 4 ways to differentiate. ANTS, really nice little mnemonic to remember. The A stands for afters, focus on the afters. The N, focus on, the N stands for new. Talk about something new. Talk about things that other people aren't talking about. So the first words I said to you when you asked me, I said, my mum is blind. I imagine most of your podcast guests don't start with, my mum is blind. So just say something a bit different, right? The T stands for teaching. So teach somebody something they didn't know. So on your website, have you got a top tips page? Have you got here are 4 ways to get yourself ready for retirement? Have you got, here are 7.5 mistakes people make when they're providing money for their kids? Is there some element of teaching on there? Because that differentiates you, right? Because if I look at your website and think, I never knew that. Well, straight away, you're clearly different than and more valuable than everybody else's website I've seen. And the S stands for stories. Like, tell me a little story about how you help. So if you were to say something like this on your website, are you in your 50s and thinking you might sell your business in the next 5 years? Click here. I go, I'll click here. And then you just tell me a little 2-paragraph story about so-and-so sold a business, and they sold it in 20 minutes and they weren't expecting to, and now they live in Costa Brava or whatever. And so all those 4 things, most financial planning websites, marketing, sales don't talk about. I'm not saying you have to do all 4 of ANTS. I'll run through what ANTS again stands for in a sec, Jackie. But you do have to do more than none of them. Because if you don't do any, it means you're not talking about the afters. There's nothing new. You've not taught me anything. You've not told me any stories. Instead, you've told me what your 7 different product streams are. Well, I don't care about any of that. So A is afters, N is newness, T is teaching, S is stories. You want to have at least one of those on your website.
And that's really interesting, because I think one of the last one, S, stories, is quite popular with many financial planners, and they put videos on of clients explaining how great their financial planner has been, and maybe, a few minutes, a couple of minutes literally of a story of how they helped them. And I think they can be quite powerful, particularly because they're coming from, another real client who's prepared to go on camera. But quite often financial planning firms create quite large fact sheets with a little story in. And I wonder whether they're kind of these huge, 8 to 10 page documents, whether that's really getting to the nub of, the afters. It's not really, is it?
Not really. I'm pleased that they're doing it, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. Well, it's not really a step in the right direction. It's a hurtling leap in the right direction. You just want to step in the right direction. I don't know how to say this very nicely. There's not many companies or people I care about enough to read 8 to 10 pages of anything. People just don't read stuff like that. If you've got anything, even if it's glorious, no one's going to read it apart from people who really care about it. And unfortunately, it's hard for us to judge our own stuff because we care about it. It's like if you pay some money to have an advertising hoarding, like Jackie Lockie's podcasts are amazing. Every time you drive to the office, you'll see it. And you'll think, oh my God, look at that, look at that, look at that, look at that. But sadly for you, Jackie, nobody else will see it because nobody else is looking for it. And so if you do an 8 to 10 page document, you could go, it's brilliant, this, it's brilliant, this, it's brilliant, this, but nobody else is looking at it. So the easiest way to think of a story is to make it as super short as you can, and you lead with the afters. So if you're in your 50s and you're thinking of selling your business, you might like to see this 2-minute video from this lady who we work with who sold her business for twice what she expected to within a week of talking to us. And so now I'm totally captivated, because the thing I always say to people is when you're looking at these videos or whatever, think of these 2 words beginning with I. You want it to be invaluable. So I think, oh, what a story. That's amazing. What a top tip. That's cool. So invaluable. But the other I, incomplete. So I don't need to know War and Peace. Like, tell me enough so I'm interested, and then put a note to the bottom and says, if you want any more detail, just give me a ring on this number. I'll gladly fill in the blanks for you. And so it's invaluable. So I think, oh, wow, they sold the business. I love that. But it's incomplete. If you want to know more, give us a ring here. And there's a big mistake people make with websites sometimes is they go the opposite of the two eyes. There's no value in it at all. And then it's totally complete. So I don't need to ring you because I've already got 10 pages of the stuff on your website. So why would I ring? I've already read it all.
Yeah, even if you did get to the end of 10 pages.
Which I wouldn't.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, actually, because I think I talk to so many financial planners and they never talk about that word invaluable and offering something that is incomplete on their website. If you want to know more, they always have this urge to put out as much information as possible to make it as complete as possible. But I guess what you're saying is it's just kind of like fishing, isn't it? You want to put a bit of bait out there and you want to get somebody on the hook and then they contact you to be reeled in.
Yes, that's right. But it has to be both words beginning with I. You can't just try and be incomplete and not valuable at all. So imagine if someone went on my website and I said something like, are you interested in selling more? Well, there's 3 things most companies get wrong. Ring here if you want to know what they are. Well, that's invaluable. That's just irritating. But if I say there are 3 things most companies get wrong, here is absolute loads of detail about the first one. So here you go, blah, 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 blah. So next time you sell it, make sure you go blah, blah, blah. If you want to chat to me about this or you want to hear about the other 2, give us a ring. But otherwise, just do this one because your sales will go up. So there has to be enough value in there. You can't just latch onto incomplete, but you don't want to go the other way and make it so complete with so much value that I don't need to ring you.
Yeah. And I think as financial planners, we waffle a lot and we waffle in our natural lives. And I think part of that is because the financial services regulator requires us to put out so many standard paragraphs about products and the approach that we're going to take and, the fees that a client might or might not pay at some point in the future, if ever. And so many caveats that we have to put out now that we just surround ourselves with a lot of fluff. So how can we start to cut through all of that? Because it's quite, I think certainly for me, if you ever looked at my website, Andy, you'd probably die. But how can we cut down the fluff when we are naturally predisposed because of our kind of upbringing and everything around us? How can we cut it all out? Of course,
yeah, I understand. I mean, my first job, I was a chartered accountant, so I get this, I go through this, and regulation is very important. It's there for a reason, because we're looking after people and making sure everyone is safe and so on. So it's not that we want to get rid of it, but we still want to be effective and impactful within the parameters we have to work within. So one of the things which I'll often focus on, say with the afters I mentioned before, Jackie, is to go afters early. So what happens normally with the way people communicate is they start off, frankly, a bit boring and they get more and more interested. And they say, in effect, on the final page, and after all that, these are the afters you get. So there might be 10 pages and it's not until the middle of page 10 they say something I care about. So, I mean, a little example, a silly example maybe, imagine talking to an accounting firm and they do a lovely sales presentation. Slide 1 says we were founded in 1922. Well, I don't care about that. Slide number 2 is a map of their offices. Now I really don't care. Slide number 3 is a black and white photo of the founders. Now beginning to lose the will to live. And on slide 10 of 10, it says, and that's why we can save you £20 million tax. So the afters are really powerful. The trouble is they said it at the end after everything else, but I already got bored. So if you flip it round, if you go afters early, your title of your presentation, as long as it is compliant to say something like this, you could say something like, how we can save you millions of pounds in tax. Now that title straight away is better than credentials presentation. Yeah. Or if you're going to do a case study, like we said before about stories, what people often do with the case studies is they do a case study, but it is paragraph 9 that says, and the client made £20 million as a result. So we put the afters early instead. Here's how we helped a client make £20 million. So you always want the afters early. I was saying to someone the other day, they teach Excel, the spreadsheet thing. I mean, how useful Excel is, but oh my word, you wouldn't want to teach it every day, would you? And this poor person was said, every time I say the words Excel intermediate, even I hate me. It sounds so awful. And so I said, well, what's the afters of the thing? So, well, they'll know how to use Excel. I said, yeah, I know that. But what happens after that? Well, they use Excel. What happens after that? Well, it speeds things up. Well, after that, well, they save a bit of time. How much time do they save? A couple of hours a week. I said, there you go. That's your subtitle. And so what they did is they changed the slide 1. So it's still called Excel Intermediate because it has to be called Excel Intermediate. But the subtitle is now called How You'll Save 2 Hours Every Week. Well, that now sounds epic.
Yes.
I mean, it isn't. It's bloody Excel. So, you know the point, right? So what we want to do is still be compliant, still tick all the boxes, still get all this critical stuff across we have to get to people, but go afters early. One more example, then I'll shut up. One of our customers, financial planner, used to send out a thing called a financial report, and they were rather upset that people would never open the thing as quickly as they hoped. And so what we did is we changed it to have an after in the headline. And so if they were writing a financial report to me, it was no longer called financial report. It was now called Andy's financial report, comma, to help you retire in your 50s. Oh, I read that.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Just how, we always pride ourselves that we can look at things from the other person's point of view. And yet we have the opportunity really early on to demonstrate that we can see it from their point of view, but we just don't.
No, we don't. We think and we communicate chronologically, and that makes sense. Everyone does this. We did this at school. If you did a chemistry experiment at school, you start off with aim of the experiment, and then you did this was the method, and you do this as a result, and this was the conclusion. So we always, throughout our education and schooling, have been taught to think and communicate chronologically. But that means if you do that, the afters come after everything else. So if you're building up to your main point just as everybody else is stop listening to you.
Yes.
When you hear it, you go, oh, yes, of course. But then if you have a look at anyone's website in the world, they all do the same thing. We're a market-leading marketing agency, they say. And then in paragraph 9, they say, and that's why we can help you double your market share. You think you just could have flipped that and it would have been better.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? And I know one of your favorite subjects is communicating internally with other members of your team and writing emails in particular. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because a lot of our listeners are either running or involved working alongside the bosses of perhaps smaller financial planning firms, maybe up to 12 employees. And this issue of copying in people and how to communicate, because whether you should be, I know you were saying, I think only a few weeks ago on one of your videos on LinkedIn about how you should halve the number of emails in your inbox. Do you really need to go to all of those kind of meetings? So let's start at the very beginning. Email communication internally between members of the team of the same firm. What would be your recommendations?
Oh God, where do you start? Don't send stupid emails. That will be a good start. I have a very simple rule with any communication, actually, not just emails, but I'll give you my general rule and then we'll apply it to emails, Jackie. My general rule with communication is you've got to get your start and your end right. So from the tiniest email to the biggest proposal to the most massive financial report, you've got to get your start and your end right. The keyword with start has to be engaging. So you put the afters early, like Andy's financial report, so he can retire in his 50s. But then the end of any communication has to have what we call a call to action in it, which is a pompous corporate phrase for saying you should be doing something. All right. So call to action, as in I'm calling you to act. In other words, do something. So if you send me a financial report and it has Andy's financial report to make sure he retires in his 50s, and then at the end you say something like, to accept this, Andy, and for us to work together on this, please can you just sign page 3 and get it back to me? Yeah, so I need both those things. I need an engaging title or I won't open it. And then I need you to tell me what to do afterwards or I'm not going to do anything. It's a bit like if I want, like I mentioned the kids before, if I want one of the kids to go to bed, I don't just look at them and do the email call to action that most people do, which would be this. Oi, kids, should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call. Because I'm not asking them to do anything, so they won't do anything. They'll just sit there. But if I want them to go to bed, I have to ask them to go to bed. So let's have a look at this from an email point of view. I said I want the start to be engaging and I want the end to have a call to action in it. So if you're emailing, let's say, a colleague, and let's say you want to, so let's say you're in charge of a team and you want the team to send you the figures for the month. then of course you could send your email and you could call it figures for the month, but that's not very interesting. So then we think, well, why are they better off after the figures? Well, I'll know the figures. Yeah. And after that, well, I'll put the figures in the commission generator. Yeah. And after that, well, I'll make sure they get paid properly. All right. So now my email title might be called Making Sure You Get Paid This Month. Again, they'll probably open that. But then how do I want to end the email? I can't end it with, should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call. They're not going to do anything. So at the bottom of my emails, I always say you do and I do. So I might say, please can you send me your figures for the month, and then I will put it in the machine to see what money I owe you. So if you now think of my whole email, it could have been called Figures for the Month. Hello, Jackie. How are you? Hope you've had a good week. I've had a good week. If you had a good week, I'd love to know your figures. I'll leave it with you. Should you have any questions, but that's one way to do it. Or I can send you this. Making sure you get paid this month. Hi, Jackie. Just a quick one. Please can you hit reply and tell me your figures for the month, and then I'll put them in the commission generator for you. Love you. Bye. So you can hear my second email is miles more likely to work because the start is engaging and the end has a call to action.
Yeah.
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 The point, it sounds really obvious, right? But here's a good thing for anyone listening to this to do. As soon as you finish this podcast, go away from this podcast, look at any email at all in your inbox and look at the title and ask yourself, is it engaging? And then look at the bottom line and ask, are they asking me to do anything? And you will be amazed how few people do this.
I see a lot of, should you have any queries, please don't hesitate to contact me. And if people have queries, they just contact you anyway, don't they?
Yeah. I always like to say my final line of an email always begins with please. So it says, please can you, and then I will. That and then I will makes a big difference, actually. So, if I wanted you to confirm the date of our recording of this, if I were to say, if I ended my email with, please can you confirm the date of the recording, that's okay. Obviously it worked because here we are. But if I then say, please can you confirm the date of the recording, and then I will do my prep so I'm ready for you, the and then I will is a really powerful thing. And you can see as a financial planner, you could do exactly the same thing. So please can you sign page 3 of the report and get it back to me? And then I will. And then you let the client know what you'll do as soon as you get the thing back from them. And then I will means they are much more likely to get back to you quickly because they can see the good stuff that will happen if they do it.
Yeah. And also it helps that if they don't come back to you, they obviously don't prioritize it or whatever, but then it makes it easy, I guess, from a compliance point of view. If they haven't actioned their bit, you can't action your bit, can you?
That's right. And it makes it more obvious, both the good and the bad impact of them not doing it. So, for example, if I say, send me the date of this recording and then I'll do my prep. Well, if you don't send me the thing, then I've not done my prep. I don't know how to say this nicely. And that's your fault because you didn't tell me what it was. And so this idea of saying to customers, please sign page 3 and get it back to us. And as soon as we do. So I do this with my proposals. When I send a proposal out to my customers, I say to accept this proposal for it to form an agreement between us, please just sign page 3 and get it back to me. And as soon as I get this back, these are the first 3 things I'll do. I'll review your website and find 5 things we can quickly change. I'll review your main competitors' websites and see where they're ahead of the game and give you advice on that. And I'll speak to 3 of your customers to see where we can make some quick wins with your sales. So it's all you got to do is just sign page 3 and get it back to me. And all this magical stuff will happen. Well, it's really hard to say no to that.
It is, yeah. Especially when it's you, Andy, I have to say. It's very hard to say no.
Oh, and thank you.
One of your other bugbears is CCing the world in on emails between team members, CCing the boss in, CCing the janitor in, CCing, every man and his dog in. So share your thoughts about why people shouldn't do that, because we were talking earlier, weren't we? You just have a gazillion emails in your inbox and most of them are a complete waste of time that you never even read or get to the end of.
Yes, I have very strong views on this. So rein me in if you think, Andy, you've stopped being helpful. It's just a rant. I think it is. I'm going to say some strong words to make a point. I think it is rude. I think it is disrespectful. I think as a professional person, it is almost professionally negligent to waste an important person's time by sending them crap they don't need to look at. I think it is the height of bad manners. There we go. So I was a bit ranty. But I think sometimes you have to say something just to make the point. And hopefully some people are listening to this and being a bit, I don't think it's that bad manners. And that's good because I'm trying to provoke a thought in people. Even if you decide afterwards you don't agree with it and you're going to carry on doing it, that's absolutely fine. There are two main reasons that people send stuff that they don't need to, copying in everyone. Number one, they do it without thinking, so it's habitual. And number two, they do it to cover their backside. And they think, my boss says my boss wants me to express myself in every way, but then my boss carries on saying, but they want to micromanage me. So I know what my boss is like. If I don't copy them in, I'm going to be in a bit of a mess. So I understand how we are creatures of habit. I also understand how you want to cover your backside, but that doesn't mean you should waste your and their time unthinkingly between now and retirement. There might be someone listening to this who's 32 years old. You've got 33 more years until you're 65 of sending 100 emails a day to people who aren't going to read them. That doesn't sound a very good use of your life to me. So what I would suggest you do is this. If you are conscious that you're someone who does this CC thing a bit too much, think of the people you're normally copying in. Let's say it's somebody called Alan. And then next time you speak to Alan, just say to Alan the word advice and say, Alan, can I ask your advice, please? And Alan will say yes, because who can't? Because they want to know what it's about. I copy you in on lots of emails I send, Alan, because I think you want to know where I'm at with everything I'm doing. Is that what you'd like me to do? Or would you prefer that I only copy you in on an exception basis? So what would your advice be, Alan? So that's a very polite way of asking the other person, what do you want? Now, if Alan's a bit of a micromanager and says they want copying on everything, then you know you're not wasting your time, right? But if Alan says, I'm so glad you've raised this, every time you send me something, I want to at least maim you. Well, it's probably quite good you had a chat with Alan because you go, well, I'm glad I've asked. Yeah. And so what I do is when you say the word advice, it takes away all the potential conflict of, have I been an idiot? You know, you're not looking stupid, you just say, give us some advice. And then if Alan says, I want you to change the way you do it, I always say the 4 words, I'm glad I asked, or I'm glad I checked.
Yeah. And what about if you send an email and don't CC Alan in to other members of your team, and then somebody else CCs him in, and then you need to respond to that email, do you cut him back out of it, or do you start CCing him in and you're back to square one then, aren't you?
Well, it's a bit of an outlier that one, isn't it? I mean, the golden rule is speak to Alan verbally to start with. Yeah, that's the thing. Have a verbal, next time you're verbally chatting with Alan, just have that chat with him and see where it lands. Now, if someone else sends you an email and copies Alan in, it depends a little bit, because if you think, actually, if Alan doesn't see my response, I might be at risk here, then use your common sense. Don't do something career limiting. Yeah. But to be honest, sometimes people, because they're covering their backside as well, that doesn't mean Alan wants an email from that. In fact, when they send it to Alan, you can look at that and think, just so you know, Alan now hates you because you sent a stupid email to him. So you don't want to compare it. So use your common sense. If Alan has said, don't copy me in on stuff I don't need to see, then you shouldn't just follow everybody else's bad example. Otherwise, you're back to where you were within 3 days.
Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it? And I think
it's difficult, but
but I think you've got to take the lead on it. You're right. You can't just, spend, I think, when I used to work in other companies, much bigger companies, you could get, I don't know, what, you were saying earlier, 100 emails a day, but maybe half of them would be CC'd in and you didn't actually need to do anything. And then quite often what would happen is if I was the boss of a team and I was CC'd in and I didn't read it, then when something happened and you proverbial hit the fan, they would all go, oh, well, Jackie knew because she had been CC'd in on this email. That was
email number 78 of the day. Yeah, so, I mean, what I'll do with that is when people send me emails, and I'm not quite sure why they sent it to me, I mean, the way anyone reads an email, Jackie, is the first thing they do is they look at who sent it. And the second thing they do is they look at the subject line. And based on those two things, they open it or they don't. Like, you'll be the same, I'm the same. So when I get an email through from, I don't know, Richard Branson, he can call it FYI and other rubbish titles. I'm still going to open it because I want to know why Richard Branson's contacting me. Yeah? So the first thing I look at is the sender. The second thing I look at is the email title. And based on those two things, I open it or I don't. That's basically how we all are with these things.
One of my absolute pet hates is FYI. Oh my God.
It does my head in. Yeah. Like, fill your inbox is, I think, what FYI stands for. So when we get these things and we're emailing people and we're with sort of cluttering up their inbox and all that sort of stuff. A very simple thing to do is, as I said before, just either go verbal with it. So you ring them up and say, "Oh, thanks for this email," because they're so surprised, because people sort of send emails almost like anonymously, right? They're just in their little dark room with their socks on and their sandals on, thinking how cool they are, just banging out emails, thinking there's no comeuppance. But when you sort of ring them up and go, "I've just got your email," you can hear them sometimes go, "Wow, I wasn't expecting that." But another thing which I'll sometimes do is, if someone sends me an email, Jackie, if I'm not going to call them, I just hit reply to them and I'll say, "Thanks very much for sending this. I'm really busy for the next hour or so. Please, can you quickly tell me what you wanted me to do with it?" So it's really polite. "Thanks for sending it. I'm dead rammed at the minute. Please, can you let me know why you sent it me? What do you want me to do with it?" And you will be amazed the number of people who just say, "Oh, it's just FYI."
Yes.
In which case I press the delete key. Yeah. Yes. So it's a really nice way of doing it. And you might all want to do this, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, like, choose your battles. If your boss's boss sends an email, suck it up and read it. But if you get an email from somebody, think, "I'm not even sure that I need to be bothered reading this," just hit reply, say, "Thanks for this. I'm pretty busy at the minute. Please, can you quickly tell me what you want?" And sometimes people come back and say, "I just want to know your answer to question 3. Well, there you go. I just go, the answer's 12. Bye. And so that has saved me loads of time. But here's the thing, Jackie, it's also saved them loads of time, because I gave them the answer straight away.
Yeah. And it's the answer they wanted an answer, rather than actually doing this, "Oh, well, if you've got any queries, let me know what you think," and da-da-da-da-da.
I hate that.
It's excellent, isn't it? And I think it's, like you say, I guess it is partly the way that we've all been brought up, but also it's, we have to, the financial planners of the future need to think differently. We can't, as a profession, we can't grow, become bigger and more professional and, avoid these, mis-selling scandals of the past if we don't start doing something differently. And I think, I quite often talk about standing on the shoulders of giants and the old guard, and actually but taking on those lessons that they've learned. And if you're newer to the profession, you want to do things differently, but you don't want to reinvent the wheel, do you? And part of that is learning those leadership skills, isn't it?
It is. And also it's just thinking of the best thing for you and your personality and so on. So, I mean, like, the point you said before about regulation, I mean, my golden rule in life, it's the doctor's rule: first, do no harm, don't make the patient worse. So I'll often like to try and think of new and better ways to do things. And I'm not trying to upstage people who are senior to me. I'm not trying to make them look stupid. I'm not trying to criticize them if I want to do things differently. But I have my own skills and I've got my own personality as well. So it's important that, so for example, there's someone I was working with recently who said, and they said, "We want you, Andy, to help us get some new leads, and we want you to do some cold calling for us." So, the customer's always right, Jackie, so of course I'm supposed to say yes to that. And I said, "Well, that's not the best way for me to help you." And they said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I understand that you want some new leads, and I can help you get new leads, but cold calling doesn't suit me and my personality. What does suit me and my personality is referrals, and I'm really good at getting referrals. So since my understanding is you want leads, you don't want cold calling, that's just the mechanism. What you want is new leads. Would you have any objection to me getting you leads through referral rather than cold calling?" And they were like, "No, it's fine. Fill your boots, it's fine." And so because I educated them as to why I wanted to do something my way, and they would still get the afters they wanted, you'd have to be a weird person indeed to say, "No, I'd rather you did something you hated and that you're rubbish at."
Yes.
As long as you explain why you're doing it.
Yeah.
So before this mystical Alan who carries on micromanaging us, I mean, I said a very gentle thing, can I ask you advice? If you want to take a bit more ownership to stop being micromanaged, you could say something like this, because I'm just using my personality. Say, "Alan, I'm conscious that I'm not quite achieving as much as I could, I think, but I thought of a way that I can probably maybe increase my output by 15%. Do you mind if I quickly tell you what it is?" And I says, "That's cool. What is it?" "Well, I'm conscious sometimes I'm copying you in on stuff. A couple of other people have asked to be copied in on stuff. And I'm spending so long copying everybody in on stuff, I'm not able to proactively go and get referrals that you've asked me to get. would you have any objection to if I didn't copy you in on stuff just for a week or two and we see how it goes? Because that would free me up with a bit of time. So that's another way of saying the same thing. And what I'm doing is I'm not poo-pooing your way of doing things, Alan, but I would just like to try something which is my way. Would that be okay?
Or maybe just seeing him in on what you felt would be the most important aspects, if there were any.
Yeah, that's right. So it's just an alternative to the advice one. So what we're trying to do here is people, it's very easy when you're young to think of one of two extreme things about senior people. Either number one, they're all idiots, if only I'd been around for longer. Or number two, I have to copy every single thing my boss does. And both those extremes are wrong in my experience. Yeah, your bosses are incredible people. They've done incredible things, but it doesn't mean that you should try and follow in their footprints. If anyone's seen a photo of me, you'll say I look alarmingly like Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers films. We're not trying to create little mini-me's that look like me. Yeah, we're not trying to create rubbish versions of me. We're trying to create glorious versions of them. All right. So your job is not to think your boss is an idiot. It's not to think your boss is got to be copied with everything. Your thing is to find your own voice and find your own way of doing it, but behave in a way that's appropriate and sensible, blah, blah, blah.
That's really interesting because it is really about you injecting your own personality, isn't it? Not trying to be a mini-me of your boss.
Yeah, and that's why I like things like ants, because if you think of ants, the afters, newness, teaching and stories, if you look at, say, particularly the teaching and the stories, they're personal to me. So if I teach you something that I found out, or if I tell you a story of something that I've done, I don't have to talk about my boss's teaching or my boss's stories. And so that's lovely, that, because what it does is it gives your own confidence in your own personal brand. And you think, oh, I'm really adding value here because I'm able to bring in things that I've done and I've found out and so on.
I remember I did a course that Dale Carnegie wrote many years ago, and he said that when you're talking about your own stories and your own experience, then you can talk with confidence because you've earned the right to talk about it.
Yes, that's right. And nobody can question it. No one's going to say, I think you'll find that didn't happen. Yes, it did. I was there.
Definitely. Andy, we are out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your insights. And I hope that our listeners will take some of your points on board and we can give them a little to-do list, can't we?
Oh, yeah, I would think so. Let's do 3 little to-do lists. Number 1, emails. The very next email that you send, have a sexy title and have a call to action at the bottom. So the very next email, whoever it's to, sexy title and a call to action at the bottom. That will be a good one. Another one will be next time you write what I would call a proposal in my business, a fee quote, financial report, whatever it is. Again, we want a sexy title, helping Andy retire before he's 60. And then we want a call to action at the end. And the final thing to do is do a little afters review. So have a look at your marketing or your sales communication and ask yourself, are there any afters in there? And do they appear early? Yeah, so it's like an afters early review. So there are 3 little call to action. It'd be great if people would do. So your very next email, sexy start, call to action at the end. Very next proposal, sexy title, call to action at the end. And then thirdly, do a little afters early review of some of your own communications. Are you talking about afters? And does it appear early or does it appear at the bottom of slide 10? And you know what? If everyone does that, that'll be a pretty good start, I reckon.
We'll both be happy bunnies, won't we?
Yes.
Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
No, I've enjoyed it. Thanks. All the best.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to other people's points of view about different things, all relating to our wonderful financial planning profession. If you know anyone who might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, please pass on our details to them. So that's it from me. Join me again next time when we'll be talking all things certified financial planner related and also dropping in on our new entrants to the financial planning profession. Bye for now.